So WEA history then. um, so WEA is an association. It has a national office and it has oversight through a volunteer board of trustees and standing committees. The emphasis is on developing leadership, judgment, and decision-making skills above and beyond the mastery of technical skills. And this decision-making includes environmental protection and leadership. That's been the dual educational thrust since WEA's inception. WEA was founded in 1977 by Paul Petzold, Frank Lupton, and Robert Christie, and Charles Gregory. The intent was to enable safer and protective use of wild lands. And it was started as the Wilderness Use Education Association. You can see the little badge on the bottom there. It was the WEA initially. And an 18-point curriculum was developed, and people were certified under the National Standard Program. And judgment was the keystone for leadership decision-making. And here's a picture of the four guys that started the association: Charles, Paul, Bob, and Frank. And I believe Paul would have been 70 at the time there. Initially, courses were run out of Paul's Lodge in Alta, Wyoming, which is near Driggs. And they mainly used the western slopes of the Tetons. So this is a picture of the western slopes of the Tetons. They also used the Wind River Range, and they did courses in Alaska. So the next few slides are about what it used to be like in the old days when WEA was run out of Paul's Lodge. So this is Paul's Lodge in Alta. It looks very different nowadays. I went out more recently, and this is full of houses now. Back then, there were only about 3 or 4 log homes. So this is Paul's Lodge. This is the inside of the lodge. This was actually a banquet at one of the courses. Very rustic, the kitchen area. This is the outfitting and food packing was done at an old railway station that Paul owned in Victor. So we outfitted there, and there were, here there's all containers full of food like bulgur, flour, rice, etc. And we did all the food packing there. To get to different locations, we used a cattle truck. It was quite convenient, actually. You couldn't do it these days, but we all piled in the back of the cattle truck with our gear and headed out to Teton Canyon. So Teton Canyon was only probably a 15-minute drive from Paul's lodge. And this is actually Paul doing a nature walk there. He didn't normally wear jeans in the when we went out, but he does in that photograph. So we do a shakedown in Teton Canyon. And this is Gary and Larry and Renee Kessler doing a cooking demo. We cooked on fires mostly. When we got on the snow, we had 5 stoves between us. There were usually about 19 in the group. So we had to share cooking in groups of 4. Then normally you work in pairs. And this is Larry cooking on a tote oven, building a fire on the top of it there. And we used old fruit cans for cooking as well. Teton Canyon was great for all the activities we needed to do, so the river crossing, Tyroleans, which actually should be termed Tyrolean, but the Wyoming pronunciation seems to be Tyrolean. So this is George Welton. George wrote the first book, textbook on outdoor education, the High Adventure Outdoor Pursuits. Rappel, fantastic rappel site in Teton Canyon. Then we'd resupply and go up into the high country. This is Buck Tilton, Ed Riola, Gary, and I don't know Gary's last name, and George Welton. And as you can see, this is before modern sunscreen, so people were wearing zinc cream, and we had enormous packs. They were about 60 pounds. Uh, we often used to use Skinny Dip Lake as a base. Skinny Dip Lake was like this, so it was a misnomer. When we talked about it, people were probably thinking something like Hawaii, but of course it was like this. It's only it's very shallow, so it's one of the few lakes you can bathe in the summer. But this was June, so this is surrounded by the wigwams. We then moved over to South Lee, and this is young Paul who was on the course at the time with Petzold, young and old Paul together. This is me in my hairier days. And this is when we were walking from Battleship Mountain over to Hurricane Pass. And you can see the Grand Teton, the Middle Teton in the background there. And Paul is in the light blue shirt looking towards Hurricane Pass. This is on Hurricane Pass with the group in 1983. This was Paul's last Teton course that he taught, and I was lucky enough to apprentice with him on that course. We're practicing sliding middleman with a J line because there was a frozen lake below us. We didn't have helmets back then. Well, we did, but we didn't use them, I guess, in those first few years. Table Mountain from Skinny Dip Lake is a fantastic area for teaching the 18-point curriculum. This is actually doing a Tyrolean with Paul. We used to practice Tyroleans a lot. Paul sleeping on a rock. This is actually, we jumped to the Wind Rivers here. This is a mountain. We could see one of the campsites, and we used to call it the Sleeping Paul Petzold. The professionals course that I was on, Dave Cockrell's handing out the food there, and there's Buck Tilton on the right-hand side. Afterwards, Paul had just come in to visit on some of the courses. And we have Kent Clement in the background there and Jeff Little to Paul's right. They both became executive directors of WEA at a later stage. In 1982, after that course, Paul went out in the Wind Rivers with an all-women's group. And he taught that with Renee Kessler, who was in the green sweater on the front row. So the Wind Rivers were the other area that WEA used to work out of at that time. Of course, there, if you went there, you had to be resupplied by horsepackers. Beautiful area, the winds. So in the beginnings, it was an 18-point curriculum. Then it changed that we also had a wilderness education workshop, a wilderness steward course, as well as the National Standard Program. But it was all around the 18-point curriculum taught on expedition-style courses. Eventually, they developed the Pro Short course and an Advanced Pro course. So the changes at WEA, in 1980, the WEA changed to WEA. In 1985, Sandy Braun took over from Paul as the executive director. In 1986, the headquarters moved to Western Illinois. There was a shift in focus, so it became a membership organization, and all courses would then only run out of affiliates. So no courses would run out of the lodge at Alta. That was completely changed. In the same year, they got a large grant to move WEA from Wyoming to the Adirondacks. And it moved there, and Jack Drury was at the helm, and Jeff Brown was a new executive director. Mark Wagstaff took over from Jeff Brown, and there was a lot of growth in the Saranac Lake years. Sometime after that, the Wilderness Box was started, which was a kind of a dual thing with the Arthur Carhart Wilderness Center. And it was a box full of artifacts that could be used to teach in schools. It was also sold out of the WEA office. Now, journals, initially, WEA had the WEA Legend, which was a newsletter. It changed to the Journal of the Wilderness Education Association, so it was more formalized. In 2008, it was the last journal of the Wilderness Education Association, the same year that the Journal of Outdoor Recreation, Education, and Leadership was launched, and WEA is a co-sponsor. WEA Japan was established in 2012. They started national conferences, and it sounds like they're very strong, and the conferences are still going to this day. There were several office moves. I won't go through these individually, but WEA has moved around the country several times, is currently in Cheyenne. So in 2009, there was a large shift in focus. The original 18-point curriculum was reformulated, and WEA moved to an accreditation model, right? The certificates were removed. There was an introduction of the International Register for Outdoor Leaders, and the US permit for the Western Slopes was given back. In 2015, a commission on outdoor education and leadership was formed, and they produced an accreditation manual on the standards. So there's been a lot of research on standards. In 2017, there was a shift in focus again to accreditation and certification, and the Certified Outdoor Leader credential was reinstated. 2019, there's a new professional path to becoming a certified outdoor educator. A certified outdoor leader training manual was produced, and the first certified outdoor educator clinic was designed in partnership with Second Nature Trek. There was new branding, credentialing, and we have standards, support standards and credentials. That's the 6+1 educational components. And the new levels of certifications are outdoor educator, outdoor leader, and outdoor leadership training course. WEA books. These are all books that are written by WEA instructors or written for WEA. The handbook and the New Wilderness Handbook were both written by Paul, but they were like WEA's Bible in the first few years. It was how to teach WEA courses, basically. And in a chapter, he does have the idea of an organization for outdoor leadership, even in the first Wilderness Handbook. In the New Wilderness Handbook, he really talks about WEA in there. The New Wilderness Handbook, the one in the middle there on the top, was a curriculum guide. Then Jack Drury and others actually put together the backcountry classroom with lesson plans. And there were two other books, one on rock climbing, one on hiking and backpacking. Some old faces. So there's me, Cheryl, and Kent Clements at a conference. We've got Mark, Jack Drury, Doc Forgy, Chris Cashwell, Renee, and Sandy Braun. There's some other old faces that if you read the handout in detail, those names will be on that handout. So there's some faces there. Here's modern faces, if you like. This is the WEA contingent at Salt Lake City. And these are the people taking WEA into the future. So I'm going to stop sharing there to get back to questions. So it gives us about 12 minutes for questions. So I guess.
Let me open it up in just a second too, but Morris, also to get you off the hook, last I looked, Mark Wagstaff is on this call too, so we have an extra historical component. And I wasn't sure, I heard somebody speak up. Was there somebody trying to ask a question that I just cut off? So if you have a question, just so we can have a little bit of order and people aren't stumbling over it, just go ahead and put it in the chat. And I'll follow that up and call on you. I can see your name if you put it in chat. But one question that I had myself that I'm wondering if either you or Mark can address is, so that we may have some folks on the call who I know it might sound strange, but maybe don't even know who Paul Petzl is. So he's the founder of Knowles and was the first Outward Bound instructor in the U.S. And I genuinely have been curious myself, what caused Paul to think that the WEA needed to be founded when he had already invested so much in getting Knowles off the ground? What did he see as the key differences between Knowles and WEA from the horse's mouth?
Well, if you actually get a copy of the original Wilderness Handbook, there's a section in there about the idea of starting a national organization, separate to Knowles. In there, he just suggests that Knowles would help with that, right? But then, of course, he was let go from Knowles. And so what he did then was he decided to start that national organization, which he did, and which in fact became the Wilderness Education Association. So he had it in his mind to do this all along. He thought there needed to be a national organization rather than just Knowles or other organizations like Outward Bound and so on. And I think WEA initially was a lot like Knowles in the way it was taught, but they wanted to reach a wider audience. Of course, Knowles it reaches a fairly wealthy clientele. They wanted to reach students in universities who would be teaching in camps. They also wanted to reach land agencies, people who were working in the land agencies. But that's detailed in the original Wilderness Handbook and in the new Wilderness Handbook. And actually, I put some historical parts on the handout about Paul. I was going to include it in the talk, but it would have gone on too long. So somebody gave me feedback. You got to just do WEA because you only have 20 minutes. So you can read about it too in the handout.
Yeah, and it's great to call people's attention to that. That is, it was not posted at the beginning of the workshop, but I just verified it is there now. If you look on the agenda, there's a PDF that Morse has provided for us in terms of dates. We do have one chat question that's come in from Guy DeBrune. Do you want to just unmute and ask it?
Sure, yeah. I'm curious if and maybe this is not the right question for this workshop since this is history and this is more of a future question, but the certification courses, are they to be offered like in universities as credit-bearing programs and non-credit, or both, or one or the other? And I guess there is a historical component to that too.
Yeah, historically, it's not just universities. There have been other agencies besides universities. So it's colleges, universities, and other agencies. Oftentimes, credit is offered. I taught at Western Carolina University for years and other places, and found that to offer credit is a big advantage because the students can ask their parents to help them with the funding if need be, if they're getting credit for it, as opposed to if they're not getting credit. But some may be offered without credit and some would be with credit. So everything's possible.
And I can chip in from the board perspective, and also being a COE myself, like I know Andrew Bobilia at Western has the capacity to deliver the curriculum and grant credit with it as well. So it's not limited. You're not forced to not do it for credit. I guess that's an okay way to say it. I think one of the things that the board is moving towards that is actually going to make it more feasible to offer for credit is that in the old days, they used to be required to have a 20-day minimum consecutive day requirement, and that's been removed. So trying to allow for a more accessible course if you don't have the time span to do a full 20 days out in the woods. So I do believe that is going to be addressed at some other sessions, and all of a sudden we just got a whole bunch of other questions come in. But yeah, you could definitely do it with credit bearing classes. Todd Murdoch was the next question.
Hey, Morris.
Yeah, I thought.
Hey, what would you say might be the ideal role for WEA as we move into the future of outdoor education?
Well, I think WEA moved away from the original intent and went more toward, moved away from certification. But they've gone back to that. So it's now accreditation and certification. And I think the certification point is a really important aspect, because when they removed that, I think they lost a lot of affiliates. I think going back to that is a good thing. And I think to stay on that track is very important. Yeah.
And then Ryan, I see that Ryan Zwart posted a similar question. If you wanted to maybe follow up, if there was an angle that Morse didn't just address.
So Ryan?
No, pretty much the same question that Todd had there. I just, when thinking about all the different organizations, associations, and the upcoming, just with the industry boom, I was just interested in your perspective on the future of WEA and where we fit in. So I think he answered it though. Thank you.
Okay.
And the board is very keen on keeping the credentialing component of the curriculum for sure. We're hearing a lot of, it seems like it used to be more in the academic venues, but we're hearing a lot more interest from a lot of different venues now, like summer camps and things like that, that are saying, hey, this credentialing procedure and having a certificate would make a big difference in terms of their accreditation with organizations like American Camping Association and insurance companies and those kinds of things. So that is definitely a unique offering that WEA would have that other organizations wouldn't have for sure.
Any more questions? We've got 5 minutes.
This isn't a question. I just wanted to say that I really enjoyed the PowerPoint. I loved seeing all the pictures. I thought that was really cool, and kind of your stories of your experiences with it.
Well, thanks. I came out to the States in 1982, and I was very fortunate. I got a letter from Paul in the mail when I lived in North Yorkshire in England. When I was coming out, somebody somehow I got put in contact with him, and he said, you must come on a course with us. And I had no idea who Paul was. But when I got out here, I was in Moorhead, Minnesota, next to Fargo. And it wasn't the America I really had come to see. So I actually went out to Alta, and it was the lodge. And see from the pictures, it was like, well, this is it. You know, it was a rustic old lodge right there in the Tetons. And then Paul was teaching the course. So it was perfect for me. And I just so enjoyed just jumping in right from the start when I got here to meet with Paul. And then I apprenticed with him on the year after. Then he'd come into the courses as a visitor, and then I was on the board for 6 years. So I really got to know Paul quite well, and fully understood where he was coming from the educational aspects of what he was doing. So it just worked out great. And of course, that the Alta has changed so much now. You couldn't do what we were doing there. In fact, what we were doing there wasn't legal anyway, because they had subdivision rules. But so we had to park our cars somewhere else and things like that. Probably one of the reasons they had to move after being there for about 9 years. But I felt very fortunate to have met Paul when I did.
That's so neat. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us.
We just got a question about are the certifications recognized internationally, including WEA Japan? And looking at the clock, I want to be careful. I mean, we've got literally about 60 seconds before we're going to have to go into shutdown mode. So I don't know, Morris, if you know more about that. I do know that we have representatives from WEA Japan here, that you could find them in the community. But I don't know if Mark or Morris has any more about that as well.
Well, regarding international recognition, Obviously, WA Japan is recognized there. There have been courses in different countries like Taiwan and Canada. But regarding are they recognized by other, like the British Canoe Union and things like that? Probably not. But Paul's idea was that choose us if you're a good fit, right? And I think that's the best way to look at all this. If you're a good fit, then choose WA.